Hello, could you please introduce yourself for our students?
Yeah, I can. Thanks, Vadim. So my name's Katharine. I'm the Commercial Development Manager for BP's Offshore Wind UK business.
Thank you very much. And why did you choose University of Aberdeen for your education?
Why did I choose University of Aberdeen? Okay, so firstly, I went to school here in Aberdeen. So I went to Robert Gordon's College, secondary school. And I also wanted to study languages at university initially. I'll come back to that later. And Aberdeen University was known for its languages program. And also, I didn't have the desire to be in halls. I think unlike some students, I wasn't that fussed about halls. And my mother lived at the time in Aberdeen, so I had a free place to stay. Yeah. And some of my best friends from school also stayed and went to Aberdeen Uni. So for those reasons, Aberdeen Uni seemed a very good choice.
Perfect. And why did you choose to study management studies with psychology? Why
I did not.
This course? Oh.
I did not. So when I started university, when I applied to go to Aberdeen Uni, I applied for French and management studies. So I started and I did 1 year of French, but part of the French course required me to take French literature, and that's just not for me. I can appreciate literature, but it's not one of my strengths or passions. So at the time I had a conversation with my mother, who also speaks fluent French. So she said, the best thing you can do is choose another subject, drop French, and go and live there for a year, and you'll pick it up. I dropped it, I didn't go and live there, but I married a Frenchman, so I'm learning that way. So I actually, in the beginning, I chose French and management studies, and then I was lucky to have the flexibility at Aberdeen Uni to switch between French, and I chose psychology. So I picked up psychology, and I am delighted. Well, I was very grateful to have the flexibility to make that switch, but it's one of the subjects that I was most passionate about, so I was really pleased to switch.
That's very interesting. And what did you enjoy the most about this course? Both courses? Yeah,
so as I've said, psychology was super interesting for me. Especially the neurology and the cognitive thinking modules and the occupational psychology piece as well. It really opened my mind, literally and metaphorically. I think some of the key lessons, I think with hindsight, knowing now, working in business, actually psychology and business management or management studies are really quite complementary as subjects. And I think that's one of the key lessons today. I think what I also learned is that you should always choose a degree in at least one subject you're passionate about, and not because someone expects you to do it, or there has to be some passion, some joy that you get. Otherwise, it's a pretty rough ride for 4 years or however many years your degree is. The other is that you don't have to be a scientist to take a science subject. So I didn't study biology and chemistry at school, and I was able to study psychology. So I was really pleased that that's one of the key lessons. And I guess finally, it always comes down to people. And psychology, I use it every day in my work life and my career. And so, key lessons.
Interesting. And apart from studying, what did you enjoy the most about Aberdeen? Maybe some of your favorite memories?
Yeah. I have to say my university hockey experience. So I joined Aberdeen Uni hockey team, and I played, and that and I'll come back to that later and maybe one of the other questions, but that really kick-started my hockey career and then continued to shape my life. So the hockey team was good fun. The campus was small enough and quite concentrated enough so that you could get around easily. You didn't have to take a bus to go to another part of the campus, which I really liked. So I think that sort of small feeling, it was in a really nice part in Old Aberdeen, so it's a really nice part of town. Some really lovely architecture. My best friends were at the uni, so that helped. And I didn't get lost in a big city, but the nightlife was still very cool, and good fun.
Good fun. Yeah. And Apart from hockey, did you participate in any other clubs or societies?
No, I did not.
Oh.
Yeah, I dedicated my attention to hockey and nightlife. So I didn't have any space for other clubs.
Perfect.
But I don't know if you want to. I don't know if you actually want to cut that, and whether or not. It's up to you.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
Next question. And how has your education at Aberdeen prepared you for your career?
Great question. So I think what was really, even back then, I feel like a dinosaur when I say even back then, but Aberdeen Uni had strong industry connections, and I think that was, especially with the energy industry at the time, and I think that was a great path or access to industry, and so that helped me prepare for my career. The thesis that I did as well was on the energy industry, and so that was something that really helped with my career as well, and entry into the entrepreneurship element of my management studies. Was a good insight into startup and ventures, which kind of BP is involved in, and so I think was insightful, and it gave me a real taste of what business could be like, a very practical taste. And then, like I said, my psychology degree is, I use that every day in the culture that we're building here in BP and in my career, and so that's a super important element as well. So that's how my education has prepared me.
Interesting. And why did you decide to study your master's at RGU?
Yeah, mainly to differentiate myself from every other graduate that was going to be applying with an undergraduate degree. Not that I mean to underestimate the value of having a degree in the first place. I just knew that to be more competitive, I needed something additional. That's how I felt. I was also sponsored, so financially I was sponsored by Shell, so I do need to thank Shell for that financial sponsorship. I also chose Robert Gordon's University to have a different experience, like a different university experience. I think it's always good to have different experiences. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's always really good to have a variety of experiences, and so I hadn't attended Robert Gordon's University either. And I think the last reason why I did it was to deepen my knowledge and quench my knowledge thirst for learning. It was sort of another level, and so I worked in between the two degrees, and I think it was a good opportunity to take what I'd learnt in the year that I'd been working with Shell and apply that into the master's postgraduate degree.
Interesting.
Every day is a school day. Yeah,
absolutely. And the next question is, what were your initial career aspirations when you started your degree? What did you want to do?
I was going to say, when I was younger, I wanted to be an air hostess. Times change, but actually the principle behind why I wanted to be an air steward was because I wanted to travel. I grew up abroad. I grew up in the Middle East and Asia. I was really privileged to have the experience of growing up in different cultures and different places. Before I started, so my parents both worked in energy, and so that was a huge influence, and I saw working in energy meant that you could travel and experience different places. So that sort of career aspiration was born out of that. And then I guess, the energy industry, which I had set my sights on at the beginning of my degree, was a ticket at the time to travel. So those were my sort of career aspirations.
Interesting. And would you recommend to students to seek out additional certifications or internships while they still study at university?
100% yes.
Okay.
I think it's really good to illustrate to future employers the extra stretch that you're willing to do to either network. So I think it's really important, and it's not just network for network's sake, or like to climb a ladder, or you meet when you network and you build your network and you have different experiences and with different people, you build your understanding, your knowledge, your relationship skills, and I think that's a really important aspect. So what you're doing here, Reconnect, like Aberdeen Legacy Association is doing, is reaching out to former pupils, is a great way to build your network in the industry. I think then it's also learn, right?
Yeah.
I felt that I needed to get an additional postgraduate degree to better my chances of a career, but it was also because I was an eager learner, and then I haven't really stopped learning since joining, well, when I joined Shell, when I joined Royal Bank of Scotland, and then now BP, you're constantly learning. And I think, so any additional certifications, and it doesn't have to be a degree, it can be a chartership, or it can be other forms of certifications. I think today you can take many courses and get certified online. The access is a lot bigger today. Yeah.
Interesting, thank you. And could you please expand your current role within BP and what are your responsibilities?
Yeah, so I'm the commercial development manager for our 3 UK offshore wind projects, Mona, Morgan and Morven. Mainly Morven, my focus being close to my heart. It's 60 miles that way in the North Sea, and it is a mega 3 gigawatt offshore wind project. So that's going to power up to almost 3 million homes with clean energy when the turbines start spinning. So I am working on the development phase of the project, so and focused on commercial. So what does that really mean? So predominantly I negotiate commercial agreements, also known as contracts, and they're commercial agreements that are with key stakeholders like the Crown Estate, England and Wales, or Crown Estate Scotland, who own the seabed, and where they're like our landlord. So we rent the seabed from them for the area of space offshore where we're building our project. Relationship management is key, so that's where my psychology degree comes back in focus. I work closely to ensure commercial construction readiness. So like when we start to construct the wind farm offshore, I deal with all the commercial agreements and ensure compliance as well. And then risk, that's a big one. So I look at managing commercial development risk. Yeah, and so I work across the generation piece. So we call generation, which is the offshore wind farm area in the seabed with the turbines. Then I also work across transmission, so our export cable, which comes out from, there are 2 export cables that come out from our wind farm and will connect to the grid onshore to give power. So I work across that full chain of project.
Interesting, very interesting, very impressive as well. And how does your typical day looks like?
Well, there is no typical day. Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking like, so I was just going to give you a real-time example of my day. So BP has an amazing newsletter. It sounds really boring, but it is actually a very informative newsletter. It's called In the Know, ITK, and every morning I receive that, and it's full of information about what's going on in the rest of BP, which is really good because we are an integrated energy company. So what that means is that it's not just about our production and operation of oil and gas. It's not just about our EV charging business. It's not just about our hydrogen business. It's not just about offshore wind. It's about an integrated view. So that's a great way to learn. So I spend about 5-10 minutes reading that and the rest of my emails, which I care less about. Yesterday I was working on a negotiation strategy. So building a negotiation strategy, it's in the form of a paper and a document, and talking about how we escalate, what our positions are, negotiation position. I was also writing a letter in response to the Crown Estate Scotland as well. So it was making sure that everyone had seen what we're planning to reply. So lawyers, engineers, project directors. I mean, it's like herding cats. I spend a lot of time influencing others. I don't directly line manage anyone today, so I don't, but I still really focus on building our culture and team spirit here in Aberdeen. because Offshore Wind were based in London, we're based in Edinburgh, and we're based here.
Yeah.
I also was working on, so I co-founded the Global Women of Wind Network in BP.
Wow.
So we're having our year-end kind of review of like what was our plan, kind of like I imagine you have, you know, for Aberdeen Legacy Association. We set a plan for 2024 and what we wanted to deliver to this internal network, and then we're looking back and reflecting on, did we deliver what we said we were going to do? We set it up for all the women that are in BP in wind, to help build their network and to give them access and opportunities, because I'm a big believer in inclusion. That's a big part of what I've done. So that's just this morning.
This was very impressive.
Yeah.
Wow. And what attracted you towards BP?
Yeah, so I joined BP in 2017 in the United States, and it was just coming back after a career break. One of my best friends worked in BP. So I guess, you know, the thing is about Aberdeen, the amazing thing about Aberdeen is a small city where everyone knows everyone. And originally that really like bugged me. Yeah. It was, you know, you couldn't do anything without everyone knowing your business. That's how it felt a little bit in Aberdeen when I was growing up. However, having come back after being out of the UK for 17 years, to Aberdeen, I am absolutely delighted that it's a small city, because the network and the industry is so strong, and my mentors are still here, my sponsors are still here. So I think, why I was attracted to BP. So my best friend worked for BP, and she said, look, there's an opportunity. And I was like, and she raved about BP. And so, you know, you take a chance. Yeah. I think also it was an opportunity that came up in onshore wind at the time when I joined BP in the US. And it was just before wind got sexy. So, I mean, I wasn't like the only applicant, but it offered a real change to my oil and gas experience, and that really interested me. So for those two reasons, and actually at the time oil and gas had tanked, like the oil price was really low in the US, well, across the world, and the doors that previously were open for me to rejoin the gas industry were closed. And so BP offered an opportunity, because the onshore wind business wasn't impacted by the downturn in the oil and gas prices. So
that's great.
Yeah.
And how is working at BP different from working at other companies that you used to work for? Yeah.
So when people always ask me about the difference between BP and Shell, and I say, like, a bit flippantly, same but different. And then some people liken them to like brother and sister and this kind of thing. So my experiences between BP and Shell have been quite different. So it's hard to compare. It's not like I'm comparing apples with apples. So my experience with Shell was in the earlier part of my career, I was moving around. I was in the Middle East, I was in Asia, I was in the UK, in London, in a very different role to what I'm doing now in BP. Both big multinational companies, so, you know, big company feel, so that's not that different, and they both care deeply about their people, so that's not that different either. I think probably the biggest difference was when I joined the Royal Bank of Scotland's graduate scheme in London, and that's a bank, and so that's quite different to how Shell and BP operate, but it was a graduate scheme, so I didn't experience a graduate scheme here either, and so it's difficult to compare, but I would say that's a very different way of working. And then if I even think way back to my very first job, which was with a metering company here in Aberdeen, that only had 15 staff. So that's probably the biggest difference, like going from an experience which was amazing, as a marketing coordinator, and I was looking at their quality ISO certification and implementing that, to then working for a multinational energy company. I think that was the biggest difference. I think what I learned from that was that I wanted to work in a big corporation. It was a great experience in a small, but it wasn't for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how would you say renewables industry changed through your time at BP?
Oh yeah, it's really changed. So I joined our onshore wind business in the US. So it was is an onshore operating business. So the turbines are turning, we're generating power, and that's been for decades. I always looked across the water here at the UK at the time going, oh, like all the offshore wind industry is taking off in Europe and there's nothing here in the States. Like almost, it felt like nothing in the States. And I felt like in a way the United States was really behind, like really ahead when it came to onshore wind. And I understand why, because in the UK there have been reasons why, restrictions on onshore wind development in the UK. But I still thought in some regards the US was way ahead, a bigger industry and more developed. But then since coming back here and moving into offshore wind in the UK, it's taking off. And in fact in Europe it's taking off far quicker than in Asia it's even faster, but compared to the US. So it has changed. I think technology has changed too with the introduction of floating wind technology as well since I started. It has evolved, I think, and it's become, even if you look at the statistics of wind energy powering nations, the makeup has, I think there was a day this year where the whole of the UK was powered by wind or clean energy, and so that's an amazing achievement. So I think we're seeing much more wind and renewables in the mix, but it's not either or. So I know one of your questions was around do I see renewables replacing fossil fuels, and I think for me it's complementary. So it's a part of a mix. It's really, we need both, and we need an accelerated energy transition with that mix. So that's how I see it.
That's very interesting, thank you. And what have been some of the significant challenges that you had to tackle in your career?
I would say one of the biggest, someone really cool who's since sadly left BP, she posted a CV of her failures internally. And she had a CV of every failure she had experienced throughout her career. It was very brave, and it was super vulnerable, and it was really interesting and honest. And so I did the same. I looked back at my career and I thought, where have I felt like I failed or had the biggest challenge, or because I think when you have adversity sort of breeds resilience and learning. So I would say I faced my first failure, or it's not really a failure, it's more of a challenge, is I wanted to see if there was a life outside of energy. So I chose the Royal Bank of Scotland's graduate scheme as a way to see if I was it was a financial markets, big city, bright lights, big money, that kind of thing, lured me to London, and I realised it wasn't quite what I thought it was. So, but I still met some amazing people to this day, doing amazing things in financial markets and with Royal Bank of Scotland, but it wasn't for me. And I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges, is to realise that wasn't for me, and be accountable. I think the second challenge, I had gone out to the Middle East in a role that I took because it meant that I could travel, and it was a role that really wasn't suited to me. And at the time, I think initially, I was lucky to change roles, but there was a period of my career where I was really, really down about the role and some of the people who no longer work for Shell. So, unsurprisingly, but they did nothing to help. And I think that was probably one of the most alone feelings I'd had in my career to date. I had up until then really felt like I had rose-tinted glasses. I'd had amazing experiences, and that was the biggest, kind of one of the biggest challenges in my career at the time. But I bounced back. I got out of it. I didn't sit there and play a victim, or I just decided, right, I need to change track and I need to just pivot. I think the third was the career break. So I went to Aberdeen Uni to get a degree. I was raised by my parents to be financially independent, driven, ambitious, and I never for once imagined handing in my notice or my resignation to Shell. Like I had carved out my career, I had built a path, but I became pregnant with my second child really quickly after my first, and I decided to take some time to spend with my really young children, and that was when I was in Singapore. And I found myself on the phone with this lovely lady from HR, crying, saying, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm handing in my resignation because I want to take a career break. And it was kind of one of the biggest decisions I made in my career, and that was probably one of the biggest challenges. I think the bigger challenge was trying to come back. So after 6 years, I think one of your questions is, how do I feel about coming back from a career break? Because I took a 6-year career break. I think it was so difficult, and it shouldn't be difficult for either parent. So, because today I think for fathers or paternity leave, we've made huge progress, because originally maternity leave was only for the mothers. Now it's in some companies it's shared or equal leave. But yeah, I think coming back I found it really hard. People were like, oh, you've been out of the industry for 6 years, not valuing the time that I had. And I was at a conference, a Powerful Women conference, because I'm an ambassador for Powerful Women. If you don't know who they are, look them up. Powerful Women organisation looking at gender representation in the energy industry. There was a gentleman on one of the panels at the annual conference, and he said, I hire, some of my best hires are returning mothers to work after having kids, because they're the best people at managing chaos. I like to think I manage chaos. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges as well. But I learned a lot from that. I made my pivot to renewables, whereas maybe I wouldn't have chosen to take a radical redirection if I'd stayed in a career. So I think you have to see the silver lining, or you have to take the learnings from adversity and the challenges you face. Yeah.
Wow, this is very inspiring and impressive.
Yeah.
And do you have any advice for people who have doubts about starting a family due to their career?
Do it. You won't have any regrets. Yeah. I mean, really, that's it. It's quite simple.
Okay. And do you have any books or resources to share with our students that were particularly beneficial in your career? Or maybe some books that are not particularly career related but still are beneficial?
I have a list.
Okay.
So TED Talks have been quite an inspiration for me. TEDx in Aberdeen, I was really lucky to go to 2 years ago. And TED Talks in general, I've got some real favourites, like How to Start a Movement is one of them. Carla Harris's How to Find a Sponsor, or How to Find Someone to Help You Get Ahead at Work. So TED Talks, podcasts, I'm a big podcast fan. Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett, for some but not all of his podcasts. The Hidden 20%, so my son is autistic and ADHD, and I was also the co-chair for our neurodiversity network within BP. So the Hidden 20% is started by a gentleman who is autistic himself, and he interviews neurodivergent celebrities and shares their stories. So it's really insightful. Women at Work, Harvard Business Review. The Rest is Politics, Offshore Wind podcast, and then Transition Talks by Net Zero Technology Centre. So and Stephen Shield runs that. So there's a lot of podcasts out there. And then books. So Grit by Angela Duckworth. I'm currently reading Revolting Woman by Lucy Ryan. It's not like a Roald Dahl revolting rhymes type book, it's about, there's one group of consistently ignored in most companies diversity strategies, which is professional women over the age of 50. I'm not 50 yet, but you know that will come, and so they're faced with a triple whammy of discrimination: not male, not young, or linear in career paths, which my career path has definitely not been linear, and as a result they're leaving their corporate careers. And so this is quite interesting data around they're leaving with their abundant wisdom and their energy and ambition, and I think that's a miss with corporates. And I'm also reading Corporate Escapology by Adam Forbes. So he is a friend of mine, I'd like to think, and mainly because I know him as the author, but he just makes sense. So his book is about helping people detach from corporate life. So recognizing your own value, developing your offer, and making a sustained, safe, successful exit from your company. Now, I'm not talking about exiting BP before the rumor mills start, but it's a really good insight, and he makes sense. And then networks, internal networks. So we have employee resource groups within BP. So like I said, I was the co-chair of the Neurodiversity Network. And also I'm on the steer committee for the Women in Wind network. Internally, that's the best thing you can do. So one of your questions was around students often struggling with that transition from academia to working life, right? And I think one of my suggestions is finding your community. So employee resource groups are a great way to find you. We have employee resource groups that are neurodiverse, like community. Age diversity, we have LGBTQ+, we have what's called Pride, we have the Positively Ethnic Network, we have a range of networks, and women's networks, and I think that's my advice to, if you're struggling, is to find your crew, find your community. And then external networks are super important. So I've just joined the Association of International Energy Negotiators. I'm also an ambassador for the external network Powerful Women. There's the Global Wind Energy Council. I mean, there's a lot. It can be overwhelming to know which network is best for you, but that's where you can ask mentors in the industry or your colleagues, or what the best and the most appropriate network to join if it's going to help you in your career.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And the last question for today is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, I've got 4 pieces of advice. 4 pieces. Yeah. Failures, so it's a bit about the failure piece. They never feel great at the time, but can be a massive learning opportunity, and they actually bring real growth. So that's one. The second is lift other women up and don't step on them. And that doesn't apply to other women, that applies to men as allies for women. So I think that's for everyone. Lift other women up, don't step on them. Gratitude, practice gratitude. So a really cool guy called William Aruda, who came and spoke to us a few years ago, he said, practice 9 minutes daily of gratitude. And so I diarise 9 minutes in my diary every day to say either a written email thank you. I'm old school, so sometimes I write a thank you card to someone. Wow. Sometimes on LinkedIn I will praise someone and lift them up on LinkedIn. And I think the feeling of gratitude and giving gratitude, what you're thankful for, is really important, and it brings you joy. So a simple thank you goes a long way. And then the fourth, great minds do not think alike. So make sure you include all minds in the conversation, not just those that you identify with. Wow. So that would be, they're my 4 pieces of advice to my younger self.
Amazing, perfect. It was perfect.
Great.
Perfect.
Well, thank you for having me, I appreciate it.